kind of taught. So there is a delicate balance here. I see Jeff nodding his head and smiling. There's a delicate balance here between giving information, asking for feedback, but not sitting on the idea that they're going to make the decision for you. And I think that's a tightrope. Is that safe to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you yield the high ground, good luck getting it back.
Well, that's what it is. Yeah. Once you, right. And we've seen examples in other districts that are remain unnamed that when a higher level of input was allowed either from the community to the board, once you allow people to make a decision for you, it's hard to get them not to make it for you the next time. So that was
I've
one
seen
thing.
Superintendents that when they learn that lesson the hard way, they have to go to a different district to
Right.
restart.
Yeah. There's no way to put the horse back in the barn after it's out, the way it's saying it here. Oh, and another thing too was, I always finish with my board notes, I always say, if this needs any clarification, please reach out to me. Because I never want to send a signal to the board that I'm not willing to explain or help as necessary. That's one thing I really, I preach that with the board right there. Another thing I did, I had scheduled phone calls. I had set times in my week where I was going to make a phone call to somebody. 11 o'clock every Friday morning, my Board of Ed president's phone rings, and it's me. It's a set meeting with my contact. He's the only board member that I speak to regularly like that. And I'm going to say, of the 40 weeks of school, of the 40 phone calls that I made, I didn't call them vacations, but you know what I'm saying. I'm pretty much going to say that 90% of those phone calls were, hey, how's it going? Doing great here. Minor item, minor item, minor item. Good. Anything else? Great. Good talking to you. Click. Strong, positive, regular communication with my board president. And these were items that I used for if I want to give an update on something, if I want to give them a heads up on something. You know, if there's something kind of cooking in the district that you're not really sure about, and you want to say, hey, listen, you may get a phone call about this, or a parent brought this question up. It's always good to have the board president know in advance of the phone call, because of the expression forewarned is forearmed. He'll be aware that that phone call is coming through like that. Another scheduled phone call I had was on a monthly basis. I give our mayor a call. I call him 15th to 16th of every month. How's it going? Anything going on? What can I do for you? Can I help you out in any way? Things like that. And then also, obviously, I have my recommendation would be if you have building level administration. I think it's, and I don't sit in that seat, but I think if you're in a central office and there's 4, 5, 6 schools in your district, sometimes it might be hard. You might get caught up on your intra-office stuff. You might need to schedule reaching out to your building level principals. You might want to say to yourself, 10 o'clock Monday morning, there's a phone call that I'm going to make to the principal, the school where she is, or the school where he is. I think that's a good thing to do. Because I do find sometimes, and I think the other superintendents might agree with this, it's sometimes easy to get sucked into your office. It's easy just to, you could literally stand at your desk or sit at your desk the entire day, and I have a standing desk. And you can sit at your desk the entire day and just buzz through paperwork and never touch the phone and speak to a person. So that's an important thing. This was a big one I did here. Observe, observe, observe. I walked in, I watched a lot of things. I tried, and this was actually and as I started the superintendency, I stood in the hallways a lot. I stopped into a lot of classrooms, and I would walk in carrying nothing. Because the minute you walk in with a pen and paper, first thing I'm thinking is, I'm getting evaluated. I'd walk in and have my hands in my pockets, I'd stand in the back for 5, 10 minutes, and I would move on. I watched the lunchroom. That sounds like micromanagement, but I'm the principal also. I watched the lunchroom, I watched recess, I went to sports games, I watched to see how the crowds act, what could our staff members be doing there. I learned that when I watched a lot, if I was taking notes in my head, when I left the room, I would send myself an email. That's something I picked up on, because you can't remember everything during the course of the day. And I would kind of have a folder going of different things that I saw. For example, like one thing I picked on very early was our recess was great. Our staff members worked really hard. Our backfield was really big, and we had kids all over that field. I had to remind our recess supervisors to spread it out more across the field, that children shouldn't be, the furthest human being away from the building during lunch shouldn't be a child. There should be at least an adult who's with that child. Things like that. Also, by observing a lot, I also didn't always comment on everything that I saw. And I'll get to that point later on. The thing about, I didn't give a lot of feedback all the time, because people would begin to think that they lived under perpetual observation. And that changes their behavior. If I walk into your classroom, and I carry the weight of the superintendency, and I'm watching you teach, you think that you're being evaluated. That's no human reaction. If every time I did that, I spoke to the person about their performance, they would modify their performance every time they saw me. And you really don't want to have that. human nature is you want them to be comfortable just having you watch them, you spend time with them, and you sort of build that level of comfort with each other. And also, spend time with dismissals. If you really want to see, if dismissal is really where there's a arrival and dismissal, especially cars and children and buses, to me are hot spots in terms of district safety, and could be areas that you really want to be careful about. Another thing I did too, and this actually relates to a former superintendent of mine, a guy I worked for back in Hawthorne, asked a lot of questions. And your questions shouldn't be, I was very careful when I spoke to staff members, my questions weren't about, I think this, tell me why I'm wrong, but rather, what do you think of this? And asking questions really serves two purposes. It helps to establish a healthy give and take back and forth between people. You want to get input from your staff if you believe in them. And the other part too, it really builds your level of understanding about the district. And I think that when you clearly establish with the district that you know what's going on, you carry a lot more weight into your decisions. It's kind of like a scale that gets higher the longer that you're there. The longer that you're there, the bigger issues you're allowed to weigh in on more and more and more and more because you spent more time there. And here's the other thing about questions too. And when I worked in Hawthorne, I worked for Rich Sprito, superintendent there. And he was a great guy. He was the guy who really plucked me from obscurity in the classroom and dropped me into an assistant principalship. When you called Dr. Sprito about something, and myself and Dr. Freed out of Freed, we both worked with Dr. Freed, we joked that it was like being on the witness stand. It really was. And it was a good thing. When he had, well, why this? Why'd you do it that way? Could it be different? Our conversations would be 15 or 20 questions back and forth about the action that we wanted to take. And it really taught me to make certain that I thought things through fully before I made decisions. And the question was never like, like you thought you were in trouble, but he really wanted to talk about the situation at hand. And it made me more comfortable in working with him, and then it made my decision-making better, knowing that my superintendent was going to want to know as much as possible about the subject. And the reverse of that was not only did he ask me a lot of questions, but he was very open to seeing things differently. And I thought as an administrator that sent me a really, really strong message about how I interact with my superintendent. And there were some things that I was just plain dead wrong about. That if I didn't have him to talk to, if I didn't have him to give me feedback on, that I would have really made a major mistake. And I had that with him, and that was a very powerful thing. On that same sort of theme, create feedback opportunities. Create the chance in which people in the community, staff members, parents, board members, anybody can give you feedback. Being new last year in Norwood was interesting because I followed an interim and he was there for 2 years before me. And then before him, there was a superintendent for roughly 25 years. So you had a 25-year superintendent who was ingrained in the DNA of the district. You had 2 years of an interim, and then you had me. I asked a lot of questions of people, and one way to collect questions is do surveys. We use this thing called SurveyMonkey, which is they build it for you. We sprung for the $99, the silver package, which gives you some metrics. You can see your percentages really easily, and we really thought that was a positive thing we did, and it felt like people were engaged in the process. Parents could weigh in on district practices. Once again, I didn't give them the decision-making power. I solicited their input, I took it, and I made decisions that needed to be made. But one thing I do say when I collect surveys, and I meet with people, and I also do a monthly superintendent coffee, where I invite parents to come in. I do it the night of board meetings, because I'm usually stay at work. We would basically be very informal meetings, and I would listen to what parents had to say. But I did emphasize in those meetings that listening to you